Part 10, and we've got 22 minutes to go.
A force that could continue its current domination of the public discourse and scene if Ms. Kamala Harris and the shadowy and unknown forces behind her ascent to power.
Shadowy and unknown forces, as though the largest, shadowiest, mega donors super PACs aren't supporting Republicans or supporting Republicans as well, and or the fact that they're all shadowy isn't a result of Republican rule and taking over of the system with money and shadow oligarchical shit from around the world. Like, great, yes, let's lay that at Kamala's feet.
Managed to maintain their positions come November. What is Kennedy like as a personality? Extroverted, like Trump, although perhaps not as much so. Trump is hard to equal, let alone top, in that regard. Not without his pain and negative emotion, like Musk. Not too agreeable, although not at all narcissistic. Despite his markedly forceful assertiveness in opinion and as a speaker, this was evidenced not least by my comparative silence, particularly during our second YouTube discussion.
Now, the absence of Jordan Peterson opining on every odd thing that RFK may say is evidence of RFK's otherwise competence, intelligence, whatever positive thing Jordan wants to say. So now Jordan is, through his absence, a great invigorator of the myth of how great this man is. Okay.
Talkative, verbally assertive person, for better or worse. But Mr. Kennedy had the stage for the vast majority of our time together. That was as it should be, in my opinion, given the circumstances, but it is still something that does not happen to me very often, even when I intend it to. Does this mean that RFK is inappropriately forward, self-aggrandizing, self-centered? Not in my experience.
Ask no one, answered by you.
One anecdote quite tellingly reveals why. RFK Jr. and I encountered one another one evening in a restaurant I happened to be dining in during my last tour. I was there with Dr. Phil in a private room in the back of the building. Mr. Kennedy happened into the establishment, was informed that we were also there, and sent someone forward to ask if he could come and say hello. The fact that he so politely sought permission, since no offense would have been taken had he not, was something I noted.
Okay, so he's basically polite and civil when it comes to interrupting a dinner. And? Good for him.
As was his somewhat near apologetic entrance, asking the two of us very graciously to forgive the intrusion.
Let's not forget this also boils down to an anecdote of a brief interaction in how he jumped into their dinner. What does this have to do with RFK's bigger, broader ideas, appeal, consequences? Absolutely nothing. But to humanize, to normalize the batshittery because he was polite one night.
An intrusion it was not, as we were happy to see him and pleased that he dropped in. He could have just taken that for granted, and even justly so. But he didn't. A trivial happening, you might object. But I think not. Instead of presuming, he displayed all the social niceties that might be hoped for, and more.
Which means he will not presume and show all the social niceties and more with regard to any given topic, right? Naturally, when somebody's polite once, it therefore means everything else you want to infer about when they're going to be polite and appropriate.
I saw evidence of the same proclivity every time I met him. It's not all about RFK Jr., and that is a good thing to see.
It's not all about only the evidence you see or are primed to see.
Given the fame and family reputation that has been part and parcel of his life ever since day one. This is not to say that Kennedy, like Trump and Musk, is without his eccentricities. But as the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once so perspicaciously noted, great men are seldom credited with their stupidities. RFK Jr. is a singular person with everything that entails on the positive and negative side.
Again, this is just a broad, placating truism about all people. It's not a thing about RFK. It's not a thing about RFK's ideas. It's not a thing about how you evaluate somebody in the positions RFK holds. It's just fascist apologetics. Let's get the stupid, the crazy, the conspiratorial, the ones who are worked up, the ones who kind of agree with me, the ones who appreciate my point of view because it helps get them more money and more clicks and more attention. These are the things that we should be concerned with when we're pretending as though this pseudo-analysis is informing us in any real way about how to approach characters like RFK.
He has a somewhat conspiratorial mindset, which, given the means of demise of his uncle and father, is eminently understandable. Furthermore, there are indeed strange things afoot in the world today, such that Kennedy's...
There are indeed strange things afoot in the world today, because today is unique in how strange existence is.
Suspicion on various fronts may be well warranted. Nonetheless, it's still a tendency that has to be carefully held in check. Better to assume incompetence than malevolence, for example, and adept pattern recognizers.
So you're arguing for incompetence in your pitch that this is actually somebody who is part of the X-Men team that will surround Trump. Better that we assume he's incompetent than evil.
Of which Kennedy, like Trump, is certainly one, can be plagued by false positives, the tendency to see something that is in fact not there. But the tectonic plates are moving under our culture at an ever-increasing rate.
Sure, because that makes sense. The tectonic plates under our culture are moving at an ever-increasing rate. It's not that culture is constantly in flux and always evolving. It's that there's tectonic plates. I don't need to beat the analogy into the fucking ground. But this is, again, one more of the let's make it abstract. Let's make it kind of fun. Folksy.
And Kennedy's skepticism, his ability to see the forest and the trees, could easily prove something of great advantage to the American people, prone as they are now to manipulation by the looming quasi-fascist forces of the utopian, authoritarian, wannabe globalist state.
That's a lot of loaded words back to back, which if you took them one by one, would need a lot of evidence, real evidence, things that you could count, people, names, dates, that would build that force up. But this is at the heart of Jordan's presumptive feelings that he feels needs to be rooted out when it comes to analyzing the American political system. Because, okay, there's a deeper conspiracy. It's the global establishment, wannabes, whatever the hell else. It's not an infinitely complex series of economies and agendas, money, history at play. Secret cabal, certainly somewhere, is working on its agenda, which no doubt there are plenty of rich people doing all the things that they do to keep themselves in the places that they so desire. But it's this massive oversimplification and catastrophizing that just betrays whatever deeper point he's trying to make about maintaining a skeptical, and mind you, skepticism is different from abject craziness. Everything should be questioned in an aggressive way, and the counter narrative by default should be trusted more than the official one. Like, to healthily scrutinize something, you have to live in the world of evidence, not just in the I'm going to refute this because I don't trust it or I don't like it, or I made one solid point once across one dimension, so therefore I'm the authority across every other.
Imagine for a moment that Musk can bring efficiency to the federal government, and that Kennedy, with his skepticism and willing to battle Goliaths, however large, stumbling, and blind, can seriously address the twin and terribly pervasive and serious problems of obesity and insulin resistance.
So now we're making it into a bigger, broader fairyland of what ifism. We're taking for granted that Musk is going to do what he does and it's going to be positive. And then we're going to combine it with not the things he even just described about Kennedy, but a caricatured version of the things that he just described about Kennedy, and pile on his ability to fix two separate newly introduced issues on top of it. And now, can't you see how magnificent this cake that we're baking really could be if you just let your imagination run wild and have zero capacity for scrutinizing or building like numbers and names behind how shit works?